Good morning, happy Easter. How are you all this morning? You are looking great. This is going to be a wonderful morning. I'm Reverend Mary Shelton. I'm the senior minister here at Golden Gate Center for Spiritual Living. I'm happy to welcome you and let you know that whoever you are, wherever you may be on your pathway of faith, you're welcome here. We're delighted you're with us. We hope that you'll come often and make this your spiritual home if you haven't already done that. And I should say before I begin this morning that although we are a very eclectic teaching and congregation, because it's Easter, I am going to be talking today about Passover and Easter. So just be prepared if you're expecting something totally out there and metaphysical. It will be, sort of, but also, I'm trying to put everything I know into one talk for you. Isn't that great? That's why it takes me so long some days. All right. So April is the month that we're celebrating diversity and inclusion. And so with Easter Sunday morning, it's an interesting blend of Passover and Easter celebrations because Easter was chosen, the dates for Easter are movable, just like Passover and other Jewish festivals are. Whereas Christmas lands on a date, Easter lands at a time of year that's after a certain full moon and, yada, yada, on a Sunday. It's always on a Sunday. It didn't always used to be on Sunday, but now it is. So we are celebrating the diversity and inclusion that comes out of these two traditions and overlaps. But also, today is the official 36th anniversary of Golden Gate Center for Spiritual Living. It opened 36 years ago in San Francisco at the Theater on the Square, which later was called the Post Theater, and now it has another name, I think. And it was a full house. This was what the room looked like, where they were. And Reverend Dr. Lloyd Tupper was the founding minister. He was just a young pup in those days. And so he cannot be with us today, but I asked him to send us a happy birthday, happy Easter message. And so here it is.
Hi, everyone. Happy birthday. This is Lloyd Tupper calling you from my home out here on Cape Cod. It's our 36th birthday. 36 years ago today, we opened at Theater on the Square. That's in San Francisco, because that's where we all started. It was a wonderful day. It was standing room only. The bar was already humming on the lobby floor of this theater. People were gathering, and the curtain went up, and yours truly came forward, and there was a gap in the audience. I was so young, so good-looking, and so attractive. Now, I know that you probably think that's still true, and I haven't changed a bit. I'm full of life, I'm full of zest, and my only regret is that I'm not with you personally. But guess what? My spirit is. Our church is so much of my life, and I cannot thank you enough for loving it, supporting it all these years. And the newcomers, trust me, stick with it. You've got a great minister, a great teacher, and a dearly beloved friend of mine in Mary. So all I can say is my yard is full of daffodils. My heart is full of love for you. And I pray that if you're ever out this way, you'll stop in and see me. And I trust that the new year, starting today for us in the church, will be the most glorious and beautiful, prosperous and loving, fun-filled year you have ever known. I plan to come this fall. I'll look forward to being with you in October. And until then, God bless. Happy Easter, resurrect all that is beautiful and lovely, and stay well. Bye-bye.
In honor of Easter, 3 not-so-bright guys die. And they're standing at the pearly gates. And St. Peter welcomes them, but he tells them they can only enter heaven if they answer a simple question. So St. Peter says to the first man, "What is Easter?" And the first man says, "Oh, that's easy. Easter is the holiday in October where everybody gets together and eats turkey and is thankful. No, St. Peter replies, a little stunned, and then asks the second man the same question. What is Easter? And the second man says, Easter is the holiday in December where we decorate nice trees, exchange gifts, and celebrate the birth of Jesus. St. Peter looks at the second man, shakes his head in frustration, looks at the third man, and asks once again, what is Easter? And the third man smiles and looks St. Peter in the eye, and he says, I know what Easter is. Easter is the Christian holiday that coincides with the Jewish celebration of Passover. Jesus and his disciples were celebrating Passover, and it was the Last Supper Jesus ate with them. Later, he was turned over to the Romans by one of his disciples. The Romans took him to be crucified. He was stabbed in the side and made to wear a crown of thorns, and he was hung on a cross, and then he was buried in a cave, sealed off by a huge boulder. Every year, the boulder is moved aside so Jesus can come out, and if he sees his shadow, there'll be 6 more weeks of winter. Kind of, sort of, but not quite. I want to share with you, because I've got the Easter lilies here for the rising of the resurrection. I've got the Jewish star back here for Passover. You may not be able to see that, but that's there. And I want to share with you what was going on at the first Passover. Now, by the time Jesus was celebrating Passover on the Thursday night of that week in the upper room with his disciples, it had been 1,400 years since Moses. So this Passover celebration was already pretty old by the time that it was happening. And it happened as a result of the 10th plague. So when the Israelites were trying to leave captivity in Egypt, they kept trying, right? And the plagues kept coming. God was saying, let them go. And then Pharaoh was saying, okay, and then no. And then the next plague would come. So finally, the 10th plague, Moses comes back and he tells his people, this is what God has said to him. About midnight, I will go throughout Egypt. Every firstborn son in Egypt will die. From the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sits on the throne, to the firstborn son of the female slave who is at her handmill, and all the firstborn of the cattle as well. Okay, that's heavy, right? And so he says, tell the whole community of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, each man is to take a lamb for his family, one for each household. If any household is too small for a whole lamb, they must share one with their nearest neighbor. Having taken into account the number of people there are, you are to determine the amount of lamb needed in accordance with what each person will eat. The animals you choose must be year-old males without defect, and you may take them from the sheep or the goats. Take care of them until the 14th day of the month, when all the members of the community of Israel must slaughter them at twilight. Then they are to take some of the blood and put it on the sides and the tops of the door frames of the houses where they will eat the lamb. That same night, they're to eat the meat roasted over the fire, along with bitter herbs and bread made without yeast. Do not eat the meat raw or boiled in water, but roast it over a fire with the head, legs, and internal organs. And do not leave any of it till morning. If some is left in the morning, you must burn it. On that same night, I will pass through Egypt and strike down every firstborn of both people and animals. The blood will be a sign for you on the houses where you are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you. But be sure, it says, now that's all in Exodus. Now this is interesting because this is the symbolism of blood as life. So in Deuteronomy it says, but be sure you do not eat the blood, because the blood is the life, and you must not eat the life with the meat. So when kosher butchering is done, or halal butchering is done in the Muslim tradition, all the blood has to run out of the body. Because they can't eat the blood with the meat. I guess rare is not a thing. So in this tradition, then, the Passover tradition, it was the blood of the lamb that saved the people. Does this make sense? Yeah? So the death of the firstborn was the releasing of something holy, pure, and innocent and gentle, and allowing the energy of that entity, that beingness, to be their savior. And they had to eat the lamb and metabolize it. So now with Jesus, we've got the perfect metaphor for the risen Jesus for Easter. Sacrifice, blood to save, right? And then eat the body and blood, but not together, separately. So we get this metaphor of Jesus as the Lamb of God. That's where that term comes from. And so in the process of celebrating this, we recognize that when we look then at Easter and at Jesus, hello, Jesus, are you there? Well, right here is Jesus. Kind of like Muhammad, may peace be upon him. You can't see his face right now. But what I had there was an image that is actually an art work that somebody did that is based on the image in the Shroud of Turin of what he would have looked like. Now, the interesting thing about the Shroud of Turin is that it's been tested a number of times. It's been dated and all of that. The last testing, I think, was in 1988. It's AB type blood. There's been a cap of thorns. The nails went through, I think, the wrists. But the image is of someone who is upright because the feet are pointing down. Someone who is upright, the hair is hanging down this way. So it's someone who appears to be levitating when this great blast of light came forth that imprinted itself on this fabric. As if all the light, all the energy, all the beingness of that human body was sent out from that body and left as a remembrance on the shroud. What we see when we come into this time of year is a million different references to renewal and rebirth. They're everywhere around us. Spring is always trying to tell us that rebirth is natural, that renewal is automatic, that it is what happens. Ernest Holmes, our founder, said in The Science of Mind, Jesus was not the great exception, he was the great example. As the human gives way to the divine, in all people, they become the Christ. So Christ in our tradition is looked upon as a consciousness, as an awareness, a deep awareness of the actual essence and presence of being that we are. An interesting thing about the story of Jesus, both the nativity story and the death and resurrection of Jesus, is that they parallel a Roman god named Mithras, whose story in those two aspects is so similar that when St. Augustine heard the story of Mithras, he said, "Indeed, I worship the same God," because the story was so similar. So which aspects of these things got borrowed in order to look upon Jesus as, to raise him up as something more, and what actually happened? I don't know, but I'm willing to believe that as a God-realized being, that it is possible that he rematerialized in a new form, a new body of light, so to speak, that could be perceived and seen by those who had been practicing spiritually and had raised their level of consciousness to the point where they could see him. Not necessarily like somebody you could take a photograph of, because a camera can only photograph a fact, a physical fact. But for an energetic consciousness, a camera doesn't have that. So it looks as if the disciples saw him and conversed with him, and Mary Magdalene saw him and conversed with him because they were in this altered, enlightened state of awakening. They were able to perceive him, not necessarily right away, but after he spoke to them. And so when we look at, I do have the lotus. If we look at resurrection, we see that it gets symbolized by butterflies, by lotuses, by the rising of the phoenix. These are kind of clues as to something that rises from the muck, or something that rises from the ashes, something that renews itself and comes back to life from what appears to be dead. Now, I would say that for us, in our lifetimes, this happens over and over again. Yeah, I see there, somebody agrees with me. So if you have ever had a time of great darkness, raise your hand. Yeah. And those are the times when, as we come out of it, we are that phoenix rising from the ashes. We are that lotus rising from the depths and the darkness and the mud back into the light. And that is natural. That renewal cycle is our true nature. That's what we're built to do. That's what our planet is built to do. We see it every spring in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere. Every spring, everything comes back to life. Sometimes during the winter, you would never guess that thing was going to come back to life. And yet it does, again and again. And so when we see that clue, what we're told is that everything is saved from death. That energetically, that which is the manifestation of the divine, not created or destroyed. It is always present, although it may be changing form. We are always present, although we may be changing form. I know I certainly have over time. And I guess some of you have too. So the process of changing over time is then we use up these spacesuits until they're finished, and then we exit and go on. But we take that light and energy and beingness with us. That is the teaching. So we are given then, what is built into us is the power to rise. The power to rise yet again. You know, we were listening to Brené Brown on YouTube, or maybe it was on television, I can't remember now. And she was talking about her daughter not wanting to go to this swim meet because she'd been assigned to do the 100-meter, and it was butterfly, which is not an easy stroke to do. Breaststroke. Thank you. Breaststroke. What did I say? Oh, butterfly. Breaststroke. Breaststroke. Yes. And the difficulty. Thank you, Amanda, who used to race in swimming. The difficulty with it is that when you're learning how to do it, you don't move forward very much. So her daughter was about 11 at the time, and she was just in tears about having to do this race. And she figured out that she could scratch the race, and she asked her folks if that would be okay. And they said, you know, it's your decision. It's your decision. But we're going to be there for the race. And they were. And at the last minute, she showed up. They went into the water, and they're going. And she's struggling, and she's gone, but she's struggling. And then at a certain point, when she came up, she looked and realized she didn't see anybody. It was like, I'm ahead. And then she really went like mad, you know. But when she got to the end of the pool, she realized the reason she didn't see anybody is because everyone was already out of the pool. She was dead last. And yet, she did it. And the triumph was that she did it, that she got wet. Her mother said, if you get wet, it's a success. When my son was in high school, he ran cross country and track. They had a big major track meet in Southern California at Mount Sac. And it was a big deal, the race. And it started and ended in a track stadium. And the same thing happened to him. When he came in at the end of the race, everyone else had finished more than a minute before. He ran into the stadium all by himself. And he kept going until he crossed the finish line. And afterward, bless his heart, what he said to me was, I PR'd by 1 second, Mom. That means he bested his own record by 1 second, his personal record. Now, he knew how far behind he was, you know, because out on the street, they were already removing the barriers. He could have stopped. He did not need to run into the stadium and have everybody see him dead last, but he did it. And it says something to me about our character and our our support system around us, that we are able to keep getting up. The only failure, I don't even want to call it a failure. Sometimes we need a lot of help to get back up. Would you agree with me? Sometimes we need a lot of help. We need everybody we know to come and get around us and grab a limb and help us get back up again. And that is a triumph, no matter how much help we need. It's the getting back up again is that resurrection. And because that's what we're coded to, it's so important that we come back to that again and again. When we look at climbing up out of the tomb of false ideas or limitation or despair or 10,000, vows broken, as Rumi said, and in that sadness, when we consider coming up out of that tomb again, that is the natural next thing for us to do. But in order for us to truly be saved by coming up out of the tomb, we need to have a sense of purpose, of meaning to what we've gone through. We have to be able to come into a place of forgiveness of ourselves and releasing of what happened and reclaiming then what was relinquished, what of our innocence was relinquished, not lost, but relinquished by rites and rituals and ceremonies that help us to let go of what we have done and take hold of what's before us, transforming actions of the past into effective learning for us now. Emma Curtis Hopkins, who was one of our founders' teachers, wrote in Scientific Christian Mental Practice, "In the midst of what seems your degradation, when you look old, feel sick, experience poverty, cry at failure, if you would cease to give way to these things for one instant, you will see the meaning of it all is for you to know that you are a transcendent being with transcendent powers." Next week, I'm going to be back in Pennsylvania for Reverend Carol's son, Michael's wedding. But the Saturday after I return, I'm doing a memorial. I'm doing a memorial for a vet who did 2 tours in Iraq and had very severe PTSD. He had been in therapy with the VA for 6 years. And his family said he was always everybody's love, everybody's favorite, the life of the party, a man who was coded to help and serve. He had been a corpsman in the Navy, which is, I guess, a medic. And he had been an EMT before he went into the service. He always had his medical bag with him. Anytime anybody needed anything, he was right there. He was deeply loved and adored. And yet there was a moment when he couldn't face the pain anymore, when he felt that it would never be okay, and he did not know a way forward, and so he stepped out of his life. If there had been a way, then, for him potentially to do what is done in some First Nations and Native American circles with returning veterans, is they're taken to the sweat lodge. The rituals are done to forgive, to put to rest what had to be done, to make peace with it, to open to the life before them, to honor the dead, to make amends, to relinquish what occurred, and to take on the learning and the life they've brought back with them. In some cases, these guys don't even experience PTSD after that, because the power of that process is healing. But this is not something that this fellow had available to him. And so the last time he fell, he could not get back up again. So I want to say to all of you that have had family or friends who have left in that way, or if you've had moments yourself where you felt like you were going to leave in that way, I would encourage you to know 2 things. First, that those who stepped out are loved and taken care of. And those who remain behind can step through a portal into a new opening. When we step out of that tomb, when we say in the midst of that despair, I'm going to step forward and know that there's some light for me someplace, and I am claiming it, I'm calling for it right now. I am moving toward it. I am open to everything. Because I guarantee you, if you stay, you will understand why. If you can know there is meaning, there is purpose, that you are here for a reason, then you become a portal for the divine to shine through you and help to resurrect someone else as well. You see, we have this symbol of the crucifix that seems like it's a symbol of death, but that symbol predated Jesus, and I like to think of it in this way. I'm going to invite you to stand up for a second and put one arm up to the heavens and let the other arm stretch down toward the earth. Now, in this moment, you are the center place where heaven and earth meet. You are their marriage spot. You are like an acupuncture needle in the earth, bringing alignment and healing when you're in that place in consciousness. Now I want you to take and stretch your arms out to the side. You might have to go around each other or turn a little bit or something. And so imagine now that you have on your right hand, or on your left-hand side, that would be that side for you guys, all of your ancestors, everybody you have descended from, and you carry part of them with you. And on your other side, you have all of your descendants, everybody that you influence, everybody that you give your genes to, everybody, and that could be Jeans too, you know, that which you have put into the world is passed on. This is the earth plane. On this earth plane, we are connected to the law of cause and effect, the law of love. Now, you can sit down because this would be too complicated, I think, for everybody standing up to do, but behind you is your past, and in front of you is where you're heading. So we are right now at this crossroads between heaven and earth, the ancestors and the descendants, or that went this way for you guys, and the past and the future. We're at that center point of now, right here, right now. This is the moment of power. This is the moment of resurrection. This is the only moment that actually contains the power for us to choose what we will be and how we will be, and this power to rise. So as we are portals for the divine, we have been saved for some reason, for some purpose. This phoenix is rising to recommend us, well, maybe to recommend us too, but to remind us that we are always portals for the divine. We are openings where the infinite can show up through us. This, I think, is the message of Jesus, really. You are the light of the world. You know, get up on the lampstand, shine the light. Let other people use you as the lighthouse, as the beacon that helps them go forward. We are the crossroads. I said that. We are the meeting point, and we are protected and saved for something, for something. Our founder, Ernest Holmes, says in The Science of Mind, we must learn to live by inspiration. That means, it's not The Science of Mind, but that's okay. That means that we should let the spiritual depths of our being flow through our conversation and into our acts. Living by inspiration does not mean living chaotically. Our whole purpose is to make the intellect an instrument for spirit. We must become artists in living. To live by inspiration means to sense the divine touch in everything, to enter into the spirit of things, to enter into the joy of living. So, as he says this, it calls us into a place of understanding what it means to be redeemed, to be reclaimed, to be saved, to be resurrected. This man's Larry Trapp. I want to share a story about this man. We received the first call right after we moved into our new home. It was a Sunday morning in June 1991, and we were sipping coffee in our eat-in kitchen, half uncrated boxes littering the floor. The phone rang and my husband Michael picked it up, and almost immediately I could tell something was wrong. Michael slammed down the receiver. Anger squeezed his voice. That guy just said, "You'll be sorry you ever moved into 5810 Randolph Street, Jew boy." Someone hates us, I thought. It must be some crackpot, I told myself, and I tried to put the incident out of my mind. 2 days later, coming home from my job in a doctor's office, I retrieved our mail and found a thick brown manila envelope addressed in block letters to Rabbi Michael Weiser. Calling to Michael, I tore open the package. Rubber bands held together a thick stack of brochures. On top was a card that read, "The KKK is watching you, scum." One bilious tract denied the Holocaust. Another called Jews the great masters of the lie. There were caricatures of Jews with huge hook noses and black people with gorilla heads. "Your time is up," threatened one note, incriminating us as, quote, "those responsible for the suffering of the white race." I felt invaded, repulsed, sickened. The police came to investigate, and one officer explained, "We suspect the person who sent this package is the local head of the KKK." Now I was frightened. There was a real person behind this ugliness. His name was Larry Trapp, a grand dragon of the Ku Klux Klan. He was severely diabetic, legless, and going blind. He was also considered extremely dangerous. Holed up in a dingy apartment, he kept an arsenal of loaded guns and Nazi paraphernalia. Both the FBI and the Lincoln, Nebraska Police Department had him under surveillance. Trapp had made a name for himself in the community by sponsoring a white supremacist video series, Race and Reason, on the local public access station. Publicly, he claimed he wasn't against blacks or Jews. He just wanted to preserve the white race. But privately, he had mailed hate-filled messages to a prominent black woman in town. And recently, Vietnamese immigrants had moved to Lincoln, and he had launched another sordid campaign against them. What makes him do this? Why is he so bitter and angry? What is wrong with the man, I thought. He had once been a patient of the doctor's I worked for, so I knew where he lived. Michael was also becoming obsessed. Not one to sit on his anger, he told me he was going to call Trapp. After dialing Trapp's number, Michael listened to an 11-minute message, Vigilante Voices of Nebraska, a recorded tirade of hate. Michael called again and again to keep the recording playing so no one else could hear it, until a friend told us that tying up someone's telephone line is illegal. After that, whenever he thought about it, Michael called Larry and left a message. Once, after seeing Larry interviewed on television, standing in front of the Nazi flag, Michael said to him, "Larry, with your disabilities, the Nazis would have made you the first to go." Michael continued his calls for months. One night in early September, when we were eating pizza in our kitchen, I had an inspiration. If Larry ever answers the phone, tell him you want to do something nice for him. Several weeks later, right after one of Michael's brief messages, Trapp picked up the phone and accused my husband of harassment. I don't want to harass you," Michael said. I was thinking you might need a hand with something. Can I take you to the grocery store?" There was silence at the other end, and then Larry's voice changed slightly. "I've got that taken care of, but thanks for asking." Maybe all the messages were having an effect. I realized they were having an effect on us. We'd started out contacting him in hurt and anger, but we were coming to care. I wanted him to heal. In mid-November, the local newspaper carried a story that gave us hope. Larry was taking Race and Reason off the air. "I'm not backing out of the Klan or the white movement," he was quoted as saying, "but I think we should work for equal rights for all." "He's waffling," Michael said. Michael called up Trapp. "Larry," he said, "if you want to talk about this change of heart, I'd love to help you." "I'm not having a change of heart," Larry insisted, but there was something different in his voice. The next night, the three kids went out. Michael and I were trying to decide on a movie to see when the phone rang and a man asked for the rabbi. It was Larry. What I could hear of the conversation left me stunned. This was a greater change than I could have prayed for. He would allow us to visit him. We got into our station wagon and drove downtown. We knocked at his door. It opened slowly. There was Larry, sitting in his wheelchair, a huge Nazi flag hung behind him, his piercing blue eyes looking up at us. "Hi there," we said awkwardly. And then Michael extended his hand. At the touch of Michael's hand, Larry burst into tears. We knelt down and hugged him, all three of us crying, as Larry repeated over and over again, "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for all the things I've done." He had us take away his KKK and Nazi paraphernalia, and over the next months he apologized to the people he had harmed with his words and anger. On Martin Luther King Day, he even joined us at the synagogue for an interracial service. Larry became a part of our family. With Michael's help and instruction, he studied Judaism. As his health deteriorated, he moved in with us, where we could help care for him. The doctors did not give him many months to live, so I took time off from my job to be with him. I came to know about the horrors of his childhood and forgave him. And more importantly, he forgave himself. One day, when he was still mobile, he disappeared on a mysterious mission and returned with a bouquet of a dozen yellow roses and a note that read, "To the most beautiful woman who helped me in my transformation from a dragon to a butterfly." And so I want to repeat once again this last little bit from Ernest Holmes as our reminder. This is the reminder that that artist that is the Christ consciousness is within us. That butterfly is always there. And we can ask for help to help it fly, or we can get out of the cocoon and fly ourselves. But this is what Ernest Holmes says. Our whole purpose is to make the intellect an instrument for the spirit. We must become artists in living. To live by inspiration means to sense the divine touch in everything, to enter into the spirit of things, to enter into the joy of living. And that's what makes rising again something to celebrate. So claim your triumphant life and rise again. Namaste. Happy Easter and happy Passover. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So let's take this moment to allow this atmosphere surrounding us to be a blessing we welcome in. I'm going to invite you to put your hands out like this, like you're receiving, like you're open to receive. And as we close our eyes together and listen to the food being rolled out, we know right here and now that that nurturance and that nourishment of body, mind, and spirit is Spirit's true nature. It is the essence of love and blessing. It is the essence of healing and mercy, present always, everywhere, in the breaking of bread, in the meeting of friends, in the eating together, in the celebrating. And so we take into our hearts this morning all of the good that Spirit has for us. We let go of our resistance to that good. We let go of any sense of unworthiness. We let go of any old false ideas about who we really are. And we open ourselves to the light of the divine flowing through us, that we may be the portals we are here to be, and be deeply and fully healed and blessed ourselves in that process. So we know this is true for us, and we bless this Easter morning all the food that we will eat, although there will be a blessing for the food, so hang in there. Don't eat yet. We know this good is around us and is us now, flowing through us, to us, and from us to others. And we're so grateful to know this right now. We accept it fully, deeply, with great gratitude. And we let it go into the law, which always says yes and is manifesting it right now. And together we say, and so it is.